Good luck.
Thank you.
If you all will give her a warm round of applause, please.
That made me feel really important. Okay, well, welcome everybody. I set out on my Capstone Experience to learn more about my passions and how they fit into God's plan for me. My mission was and is to become more aware of the opportunities and obstacles of my occupation choice. I want to be in the medical field because it's not only fulfilling for me, but hopefully fulfilling for those I'm helping. I want to be a person who empathetically cares for those in need. This is the calling on my life because I believe that God made me to be a person that deeply impacts those around me. I want to be a part of a community that looks different from the world and shows the world who God is. The verse that I used for my basic foundation for my capstone is Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. I believe that this verse allows me to empathize with those in need, and I hope I will continue to use it as a foundation for my life and for my career. As I dove into this experience, I gained the virtue of compassion. This virtue is very important in the pursuit of my career. As a nurse, being a nurse requires you to have a concern and sympathy for the misfortunes of others. As a nurse, you really dive into the patient's lives. You get to be with the patient a whole lot more than a doctor does. Doctors are in and out of patients' rooms, and nurses get to build relationships with the patients. I got to experience this firsthand with the service that I did. I volunteered at Swedish Hospital in Inglewood for 4 hours a week. I worked at the front desk, so I answered phone calls, I delivered flowers, and I got to interact with the patients' families. My favorite part was being able to interact with the patients' families. They always thanked me for my service, and they were always so kind to me. I got to witness some pretty amazing experiences, such as a man learning to walk again, or meeting and playing with some therapy dogs. I remember sitting in the lobby, and this woman was wheeling around a man who couldn't walk, and occasionally they would stop and they would practice moving his legs. At one point, he did get up from his chair, but only for a split moment. But for that split second, he felt pure joy. It was amazing being able to witness recovery and healing firsthand. I also witnessed some pretty scary things, such as a man walking in with a pretty bloody face, and also a woman going into labor. But I think the most important thing I got to witness was watching and learning from each nurse. They cared intently for each patient. Even though they had crazy hours and they worked with really stressful situations, they still showed each of their patients unconditional love. I hope to be able to do this same thing as I go into nursing. I learned compassion through each of these nurses as I witnessed them. In the book I read this year, it stated, "Nurses are witnesses to some of humanity's greatest suffering. As witnesses, they are the ones who observe and who can testify to the reality and meaning of that suffering." As a nurse, I will be witnessing more tragedy and more suffering than the average person. I hope to use that suffering as a fuel for why I love and care for my patients and my patients' families. I want that suffering to show me the inner workings of God and who He is. Suffering is something that I have gone through as everybody else has. I grew up in a split home, and coming out of that, I came out of it a stronger person, and God made me to be a person who empathetically cares for those in need. As a nurse, you enter the patient's suffering, thus entering their story. Every story should be heard, and Jesus understood this. Every person that Jesus spoke with or He healed, He dove into their story. He wanted to know their suffering, and He wanted to know the inner workings of their story. I hope to also be able to do this same thing. That's the reason I'm going into this field, to witness the inner beauty of suffering. Something good always comes out of suffering. When I think about the inner beauty of suffering, I think of Romans 5:3. Not only so, but we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. Suffering is how one grows, and there's always hope in suffering. Another important quote from my book is, "To treat clients with reverence is to honor them as image bearers of God." Every patient must be looked at as a child of God and treated with the same respect that God would treat them with. To be a Christian nurse is to do just that. you not evangelize every patient that you come in contact with, but be able to show them the unconditional love of Jesus Christ. I think using this as a foundation, especially pursuing pediatrics, will help me because I think it'll make a child feel special and just like every other average kid in the world, and no less of a person because of their illness. I hope that I will give them the love that they deserve. I don't only want to be the best nurse I can be for them, but also the best listener I can be. Sometimes all a child wants is someone to listen, and I hope I can be that person for them. Another virtue I focused on this year was empathy. I've been told all my life that this was one of my stronger virtues. But as I was witnessing and watching each of the nurses, I realized I wasn't as good as I thought I was at empathy. Empathy is supposed to be the ability to feel what others feel as deeply as they do. In doing so, you put the other person above yourself. Each nurse put everyone above themselves. Comparatively, their lives and their struggles were not as important and needed less attention. I hope that I will be able to do this same thing. Hopefully, I will be able to put everybody else above myself because I know that in my own life, I tend to ask, how would this benefit me, or how would I feel in this certain situation? I hope my patients come out of it feeling revered and as though that they were loved, and I hope that I will be able to be a person who does that for them. Going along with that, I want the nurses also to be able to witness how I do care and be able to say that I treat my clients with a reverence that is solely given by God. I wish to be the hands and feet of God. I hope it's not going to be my work, but it will be all His work. I want to be a servant of God, and I hope that I'll continue that throughout my life. All my life, I have been roped into service projects, and I have loved every minute of them. That growing up has really taught me a lot, and I've loved it, and has grown my passion and love for service. My mom especially has roped me into a lot of service projects, especially dealing with kids. I volunteer twice a month doing Sunday school, and I also do VBS each summer. I've also learned through these experiences that I love building relationships with each kid. I vividly remember one VBS where I built a friendship with a child. He had come from a very low-income household, and he was very mature for his age. He took care of his siblings because his parents couldn't, as they were always working long hours. This kid and I became best friends. We played soccer together, we talked, and we played all kinds of other games. That relationship is something that I will never forget and will mean more to me than anything in the world. That experience has taught me empathy. I've dealt with kids coming from all different kinds of households and different situations, and I have learned to feel empathy for each child. I think empathy is vital for nurses because nurses get to be with the patient a whole lot more, and they get to build relationships with the patients. I learned through this Capstone experience that helping those in need is not only rewarding, but is what I want in my everyday life. I'm excited to be pursuing pediatrics and being able to build relationships with these kids. It got me excited to think about all the ways I will be able to help these kids in need. One person that I interviewed really encompassed what I want to be. Her name was Tiffany Bartlett. I got her contact from one of my friends, and I was told that she was a pediatric nurse practitioner, and that's exactly what I want to be. As we spoke, I really admired her input because she told me things that I knew I could use even through my career and even through college. She told me that being able to work with kids was the best decision that she ever made. She told me how she loves that even though they are in the toughest of times, they always seem to have a smile on their face. That's what I love about working with children. Even if they are at the lowest of lows, they never fail to have joy. In Matthew 18:3, it says, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." I really admire the children that I work with in Sunday school because I witness them every Sunday dive headfirst into their faith, and they always do it without hesitation. I know that I can be shown Jesus through each one of these kids, and even the kids that I will work with in my career. Tiffany told me a lot that was really helpful and really informative. She told me that she was a Christian nurse, and I asked her, how does she do that, and how does she intertwine her faith with her job and with her everyday life? She told me that she would go up to patients' families, and she tells them that she is praying for them, and she always follows through on that promise. I also want to be able to intertwine my faith as she does. I want to be a Christian nurse who is part of a world that looks different from a community and shows the world who God is. Another woman that I interviewed, her name was Sheila, and she had a pretty interesting perspective on the field. She started out as an acupuncturist and pursued that for many years until she realized that her talent lied somewhere else. She was told multiple times that her personality belonged in a hospital. So she pursued nursing, and now she has worked as a trauma nurse, and now she works as sort of a charting nurse who charts things, and she files, and she does all kinds of other things. I really admire her because she pursued nursing at a later age, and she still works at it today. As she pursued nursing at a later age, she sought to intertwine the mind, body, and soul methods of Eastern medicine with the hard facts and knowledge of Western medicine. She still works at this today, but she has unfortunately not been able to accomplish this. Most hospitals were not open to her ideas of intertwining the two medicines, but she still works at it today, and I really admire her for her perseverance. She also would always stand up for what she believed in. She thought as though that a lot of hospitals wanted to make money off of the patient rather than care for the patient's well-being. But she would speak her mind, especially when she felt as though the hospital was not doing what they needed to do. I also really hope to acquire this trait because I know that I will be facing difficult ethical situations and where I mustn't shy away from my beliefs, but be able to stand up for what I believe in. She also told me, or made me realize, that God might not have me be successful at first. He also might change my course over time, and I have to be okay with that. I have to be able to trust in him through that. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Sheila is a woman of great admiration, and she walks through life with grace. She even gave me some insight into the next chapter of my life, college. She told me that nursing school tends to be sort of a food chain, and you must climb yourself to the top. She even told me a pretty terrifying saying, that old or more experienced nurses eat their young. And I hope to approach this with perseverance and patience because I know that my life is not dedicated to being at the top, but is dedicated to being a servant of God. One thing that I've realized from this experience is how thankful I am for this school. Without this school, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I have been here since kindergarten, and I have loved every minute of it. The teachers here have taught me more than I could have ever asked for. They have invested in me since day one, and I couldn't be more thankful for them. They have mentored me throughout my life, and I have learned so many things from each one of them. They have taught me to love people unconditionally and to look different from the world and show the world who God is. My teachers are people that I admire beyond belief and people who I aspire to be. Without this capstone experience, I would have never volunteered at Swedish, and I would have never interviewed people that I didn't know that well. I thank my parents and my family and my teachers for pushing me in this experience. I especially thank Mr. Spector and Mr. Butler for pushing all of us in these capstone experiences. It has made me realize my passion, and I now know my calling on my life. It has pushed me to be a better person and to realize that everyone has a story to share that should be heard. My next step in this experience is to learn more about the role I would play in this world as a nurse. I hope to answer the question, how as a nurse can I look different from the world and show the world who God is? If you couldn't tell, I used this phrase as my basic foundation for my capstone. I'm really excited for the experiences to come, especially because I will be attending University of Colorado, Colorado Springs in the fall. And I hope that that will be an amazing opportunity for me and an amazing opportunity for my character building. I hope to continue to pursue the virtues of compassion and empathy, as they will help me thrive not only in my career, but also in my life and in college. Being able to live life using these harmoniously will not only greatly affect my career, but hopefully all of the lives that I touch. I have realized through this experience that my purpose here on earth is to be the light in the darkness, especially for those who cannot see through the darkness. I think this capstone went really well, and I was taught a lot that I never even realized. God has a purpose for me, and I can't wait to see what he has in store for me next.